Well, Gareth, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Mike Carroll. Mike is the lead designer, artist, and producer on Below the Stone, which, as you saw from recent press releases, is the latest title to be published by the newly resurrected Apogee Entertainment. Of course, I'm positive you know Apogee from its reputation being the original indie game publisher behind titles like Duke Nukem, Max Payne, and Prey. And here in this, the year of our Lord 2021, for Apogee to return to its roots means finding, cultivating awesome indie talent, of which Mike Carroll here is absolutely part of that crowd. Um, so, a little bit about Below the Stone. It is a pixel art roguelike, a demanding roguelike at that, exploring subterranean biomes and layers. As I said, Mike is the lead producer, artist, and designer, so there's virtually anything you would want to know about Below the Stone can be answered by Mike.
Okay, so my first question is something that I've been very curious about with relation to indie games. They've been extremely popular uh, over the last decade. You're seeing tons of them coming in. And I've always been curious how the decision comes about with the look and the play of the game in terms of when you are designing games for newer hardware that offer so much more in terms of speed, ability, and graphics. How do you balance just exactly where you want to put the bar in terms of a retro look without being too modern, but yet also taking advantage of what some of the newer technologies offer?
Well, it kind of comes down to a couple things. With indie games, the difference between indie and AAA is AAA will almost always go with the safe route. They'll always go for extreme graphics. They'll pull all the stops on the, I guess the trademarks, the games they've done in the past, where they'll just release, a 2, a 3, a 4 on the end of a name that they've already put out. And I won't name any names here, but the thing with indie games is it's almost like evolution, where we do little adaptations to things that AAA companies won't take risks on. And you'll see that indie games are always trying to do something new. They're always trying to do something that, like I said before, AAA games won't take that risk on. And that's why you see a lot of retro indie games with the retro look. With AAA games, I guess they look at that as a risk, where indie games are willing to take that risk because they're just starting out. They're willing to do that kind of thing because they just like that sort of game.
And I think also from a cost and development time, it probably has to help you as well, that you don't have to be as fixated on all the bells and whistles and you can concentrate just on theme and gameplay more.
Absolutely. Yes.
So getting to theme and gameplay, I'm really curious about the game in terms of it talks about I've seen the trailers and it talks about the mining, it talks about exploration. So how would you describe the balance between would a player spend most of their time exploring, mining, and combat, or is it a mix? And if so, how do you go about finding your balance between that when you design the game?
Now, our game is procedurally generated, so it comes down to a mix of all those things you mentioned. But like you said, it's something where us as developers, we're always going to have to keep that in mind to make sure that one doesn't outweigh the other. We don't want something where people are running around these caves wondering, oh, where are the enemies at? Or, oh, where are my resources at? They're going to always be in a place where there's always something happening. And of course, one of the big things with our game is we want to make it so every time you descend, it's going to be a completely new adventure where you'll encounter new creatures, new biomes, and a different sort of pathway that'll form different paths you can choose. Sort of due to that procedural generation, we're going to have it where every player's experience is going to be different from one another. And that's one of the big things about our game that we're trying to push.
Okay, so would you be able to tell me about some of the adversaries that players are going to come up against as they go into the mine?
Hold on one second. Sorry, I didn't mean to mute there. I don't know if you can do that out of editing or not, but so some of the adversaries you can find in Below the Stone with all the various biomes. We're planning on having a unique enemy and creature in almost every single biome. So almost, well, we're trying to make it so there's up to 3 or 4 dozen biomes minimum by release. So for each biome, we're going to have that exact same amount of enemies minimum. And I mean, we have some big name creatures. We have the kobolds those are gonna be creatures that are overwhelming the first layer of the game. So on the first layer, you might run into kobolds more often, and on the second layer, it's going to be one of the big menaces that we're planning is the cave troll, who's going to be the what would you say, the noob check almost, where after you first beat the first level of the game, you're like, yeah, I'm doing really good. I got past that first layer. I've got past all those kobolds. And then suddenly you run into a cave troll that's going to one-shot you or two-shot you. And then you're going to rethink what you were thinking before about how good you were at the game.
Yeah, that's always the fun part, just when you think you have something mastered, and then the dose of humility comes in
Oh,
to
yeah.
really put you in place. Now, what kind of weaponry are you going to have? Because in the video I saw, it looked more like a bladed weapon of some kind, but it was hard to make out if there were other options, because I saw the little, what looked to me like a stylus, and I didn't know whether it was a tracer for a gun or something like that, or if it was just for directional purposes.
Oh, it's from the video you're watching is for directional purposes. So
Okay.
When you're looking around, your character has this sort of line to show which way you're facing, just to assist the player with combat. And of course, with the game, we're going to make it so there are basically every resource you can gather, every metal, there's going to be a weapon for that. Multiple weapons, actually. So there'll be axes, maces, crossbows, bows. They're dwarves, too, so their engineering is fantastic. So there's going to be almost medieval steampunk-inspired guns and all sorts of things, traps even. We're planning a lot of different weapons. So it's not going to just be whacking a kobold with a sword. It's going to be all sorts of different unique things you can run into. We have a lot of inspiration from Terraria with the different weapons that we're planning.
Oh, perfect. So that leads me to what my next question was, and that is, so how do you acquire these new things? Is it based on crafting and what you mine, or do you purchase them, or do you find them, or is it a mix?
Yeah, it's going to come down to a mix. I think the majority of the equipment you get is going to be crafted, because I think, of course, all your hard effort put into gathering these resources, you're going to have to, there's going to have to be some payback for all that. So, of course, that's going to come down to crafting. So all that copper, tin, that platinum, that gold, all that stuff that you find down in the caves, that you'll be able to turn into weapons, armor, equipment, tools. And there's going to be those rare drops that you find in treasure chests, those sort of rare things, that unique experiences that players will get, where, there'll be a 1% drop on this awesome Viking helmet, and you'll almost not want to let go of it because it's so rare. And there'll be those unique, like I said before, we're trying to go for every time a player goes down in these caves, it's going to be a unique experience. Every time you play this game, it's going to be a unique experience. So having loot in those treasure chests too, those things that you can find down there, will add to that experience.
And it is entirely solo play, correct?
There are plans. I can't go too far into it, but
okay,
there are plans here and there.
Okay. And that's good. Now, mission-wise, can you tell me, my wife always gets on me because I'm one of those, when I play certain games, my kind of like the old mentality of Doom back in the day, do what you got to do to get to the exit, move on to the next level. Whereas she is one of those, no, you got to go all over, you got to inspect everything, you got to try to search everything. And my attitude is, that's just one more thing to get you killed and make you have to do the level over again. if the exit's in sight, you can go for it. So how do you balance that out in this game between progression in terms of, do you have to find your way to an exit, or is it you have to mine so much stuff or accomplish certain tasks before you're allowed to leave?
Of course. So with the missions, like you just said, there's going to be a task that you have to complete before leaving these caves and going back to the Dwarven Kingdom, where you can do your crafting and everything, and storing your items safely and making sure that you can pick up new quests and so forth. So before I go into that, I think these quests are basically designed to make it so that a player always has something to do before they can just leave. So you can't just drop into these caves. You manage to miraculously find this huge gold vein right next to you, and then just decide, well, I've had enough, and then just decide to leave and go back with all this precious gold that you just found. So these missions are sort of designed to force you a little bit outside of your comfort zone and make you go deeper into these caves and explore and try to find this. It can come down to enemies. You need to kill X amount of enemies before you can come back, a certain type of enemy, or try to a certain resource before you come back. And that's sort of the design. And with that, there's always a push behind you to go deeper to find to complete this mission. But there's also a pull that, what if there's gold around that corner? What if there's that resource I need around that corner? So that was specifically thought of when making Below the Stone, when designing Below the Stone. There's always a push and a pull going on.
Perfect. So can you tell me a little bit about the music and if there are any voices in the game? Because I've always felt in some ways like the old saying that a good movie can be made or broken in the editing process. I've also felt that a good voice cast and a good soundtrack can definitely enhance a game, whereas a bad one can knock even some of the best gameplay in the world down. So what can you tell us about what this game offers in that category?
Oh, of course. We found Karam, our lead musician and composer, and he was the perfect fit for Below the Stone, because when we were first searching for people to join us as a composer, what we found was there was a lot of messages coming at us that were basically, oh, here's my contact information, and I hope you pick me. And here's a list of the music I play, or the list of music I produce. Karen was the only guy who asked what the game was about and who was interested in the project. And after talking to him for a while, I realized that the difference between him and all the other composers who were just sending me a quick message, throwing out a fishing line and hoping to see what caught, he was the one who put the most out there in wanting to know more about the game. And that's when I knew I found the perfect person for this. And obviously that's a tip for any composers out there. If you guys are looking for somebody to join, if you're looking for a game development team to join, I would seriously consider coming at it from that approach when you're talking to developers or a team.
Yeah, that's some really good advice, and that is really interesting to hear, because that is a side of the business that you don't always hear a lot about, and it's definitely interesting to hear how teams are put together and how these projects unfold from conception to completion. So the final question I have is, when you go and design a game like this, at what point does the discussion come up as to which platform it's going to be on exclusively, or are we going to move it to consoles? What are we going to design it on? That sort of thing. Because you see some games that come out strictly for the PC and then at later times are ported over. And I've always figured that was based on sales and demand and stuff. And then you see others that say, nope, this is our platform, this is it, and that's all we're going to do.
We originally went into this with Below the Stone thinking it would be PC, but when we talked about it as a team, we realized, wait a second, this isn't a game that would just work on PC. This would be something that could easily work on every platform. We even specifically with Switch, that was one of our biggest team discussions. It was Below the Stone almost seems like perfect for the Switch. And I think when we talked with Apogee, one of their things was they wanted to port Below the Stone to every console. And after hearing that, that confirmed everything we believed.
Well, perfect. That is all that I have for right now. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more about this. And thank you so much for taking the time to go over this with me today.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, man.
Very welcome.
Yeah.
You know, I always just find some of the smaller games, I know that sometimes they don't get the attention that they need. And, you know, some people say, well, it's because there's so many, it's hard to pick out. But I'm like, nah, but oftentimes some of the things that do not get a lot of attention initially, if you take the moment to look at them, you'll see there's something different in them. These are not just cookie cutter things that are being mass produced to, you know, fit a niche. These are like, wow, this is somebody here who's got something really unique, fresh, or different. And, you know, that's what makes it really interesting.
Oh, 100%. And like I said before, it's something where AAA games and their companies that come with them, I think it's something where there's just a lack of experimentation. It's something that indie games are, like you said, we're sort of like under the surface, but at the same time, we're making some of the biggest innovations where these AAA games, you'll see, I don't know if I should mention names or not, but like you'll see these games, they'll release sort of the same title over and over and over again. I'm sure your audience, I'm sure you might think of a couple names, but you'll see them release kind of the same content over and over and over again with maybe a little twist here and there. But with indie games, it almost seems like the entire concept itself is something a little bit different. It's something that indie developers are willing to experiment. And that's why I think everyone should seriously consider looking at these indie games and taking the time to sift through them and find this kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I think a big chunk of that is it's money, plain and simple. I know I years and years ago did some work with a couple of the public, you know, at the time they were bigger publishers. One got absorbed and one's no longer around. But it was always the argument that people had of non-gamers are the ones making the financial decisions. And it wasn't about quality, it was about quantity. How many units can we ship this quarter? We have to make the stock. Oh, it doesn't matter if it's done or not. Doesn't matter if it's stable. It's over budget. Get it out the door. We'll just patch it later.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the trick. When you have a huge budget, you have the stockholders to keep happy. So there's well, if it's selling, let's just keep cranking it out until it stops selling. Whereas with the indies, they have the freedom to be more creative, to be more adventurous with it, because there's not the pressure of the CEO and, you know, Wall Street on top of them saying this thing had better sell, 2 million units or we're going to have words. So
absolutely. 100% agree with what you said there.
Yeah. But that's just me. I get cynical, unfortunately.
Yeah. Believe me, I do too. And I'm in it.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Yep. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. And I hope your viewers enjoy this. And thank you for your time, Gareth.
Oh, anytime.